So if you make or move anything physical, start rethinking your business around humanoids as a supplier, service provider, or user. It's quiet now, but the ramp up will be fast. Sobering words indeed, not mine, but those of my guest for this episode of Over the Horizon. Pero Micic is the founder of a Future Management Group AG. He's also the CEO. Welcome, Pero. Great to have you on today.
Hi, Rhoda.
There's been so much that's been happening in the world of humanoid bots. You've had Figure bring out these brilliant videos. Then you've got Optimus. And we recently had the Salesforce CEO, Mark Benioff, at the Tesla location with Elon, looking at the Optimus bot. There's so much happening. Give us your high-level view to begin with. Where does the humanoid bot industry stand?
Well, we've had industrial robots for 60 years now, and we'll be using them for another 100 years. So they're here to stay.
Just 100?
What happened is that first ambition came, and in my impression, it was ignited by Elon Musk's presentation of their project to build a humanoid robot, which was ridiculous at the beginning with this person dancing. And what happened is the progress in large language models and in reasoning models. So those two things together ignited and started the humanoid fantasy. We've seen those robots in science fiction movies, and we kind of got used to them, but we never saw them in real life. But we are now in a situation, in a time where at a horizon of 1, 2, 3 years, we're going to see them in factories, we're going to see them in logistics, then we're going to see them in services, and eventually in the household. So is it a hype? Yes, it kind of is, but the trough of productivity, or the slope of productivity, will be happening very fast.
When do you see that tsunami hitting? Is it in 3 years? What's your definition of that disruption? When does it really hit society, and how? Is it labor? Is it intelligent work? And I think we're seeing already, if we remove the embodied AI part, just AI taking knowledge jobs is already starting to disrupt the workforce, right? But since we're talking about robots here, when does that disruption really hit, and how?
Well, if we look at forecasts and real world numbers, so we have a couple of companies testing humanoid robots from NIO, Mercedes, BMW, Xiaopeng, Magna. They're all testing them. Are they doing real work? Not really, not yet. But if we take Elon Musk's assumption or ambition to produce 1 million bots in 5 years, in 2030, then we can, as Scott Walter did, we can infer the slope, we can infer the ramp up. So next year, we're going to see a couple of thousands. The year after, we're going to see a couple of 10,000s. And then I would assume that we have a production of maybe 3, 4, 5 million robots in 2030. So this is not really changing the entire world because we have a lot more people. But first, a robot is good for 3.5 capacities of a person. And after that, it's going to happen fast. So we're producing 84 or 90 million cars. A robot is just 5% of a car. And we will be there in maybe 2035, 2040. But we have tens of millions of robots being produced each year.
Some would say you're being conservative, and I'm going to signpost this because this is the boys back again, Mark Benioff, Elon Musk, and Optimus there.
Yeah.
When Salesforce signals this, you got to sit up and take notice, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Because nobody would expect Salesforce to be involved in humanoids at all.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So let's focus on your brilliant post. I think if you can just briefly give us the lay of the land, and let me just pull it up on screen so people know what we're talking about. So this caught my attention, and I was like, wow, this is one of the most sublime, clear-headed breakdowns that I've seen on X. Thank you for posting this. Give us the lay of the land, please, the top view, and then we'll go into it.
So, seeing humanoids develop, I first had a couple of questions that our clients ask us, which is, will they be capable enough physically? Will they be capable enough cognitively? When are they coming, and how much will they cost? So this was the fourth question. And I addressed that in a video I did a couple of months ago. And what I posted here is just the core of this video. So the question was, what is the real world hourly cost assumed to be in 2030 at the beginning and in later years? So I did 3 scenarios, and I ended up to reveal the number already at $14 per hour. And this is really the maximum. I used very, very cautious, careful, and conservative assumptions. I even included a lot of cost for humans who care about the robots, who care for the robots during their work. So more than $14 per hour is almost unimaginable. And we will soon be at 12, 10, 8, 6, 4. And at some point in time, Rethink X, Adam Dorr, is going to be right when they say it's going to be less than $1. So I arrived at 14 and said it's soon after it's going to be 12 and 10. But that's already enough to prove the thesis, because companies will have to use them in global competition. There is no way to refrain from using humanoids in any kind of physical process.
So just to be clear, you're projecting this cost at by 2030, cost of deployment.
Yeah. So
is this outright purchase of bots, or is this on a lease basis?
My assumption is that most companies, most manufacturers will not sell them, because they can much more money when they do robot as a service. So you will have, most likely, again, assumption, to pay something upfront that covers a production cost. And then you will pay by the month, by the week, by the hour, or by the token. So there must be some measure of benefit in order to make it really pay per use. And it's all in, so it's all included. It's the software, it's the hardware, the services, repairs, even electricity. And again, humans who maintain the robots. I included like half the operating cost of $30,000 per year is for humans. And I would say this is way, way too much. But again, I wanted to be very conservative.
Yeah, you're clearly being pretty conservative. Now, how much will it cost, do you think, for the companies to manufacture? Because Tesla said it'll bring it down to about maybe 50 or 60,000 in the midterm. The Chinese are bringing out their unitary bots for about $6,000. So there's a wide range. But of course, the Chinese bots are mostly teleoperated and remote controlled, and they don't have an AI brain in them. So what's the value of the embodiment, as in the physical bot, and what's the value of the AI brain in that? What's the ratio in your calculation?
Well, if we compare it to a car, to a vehicle, the mass, the physical mass, is maybe, as I said, 5% of a car. Maybe it's 10, but it's not more. So a production cost of a regular car might be $30,000. And if you take 5 or 10% of that, this might be the cost of the physical production of the robot at scale. But at scale, we're not going to be at scale in 2030. So this is maybe for 2035, 2040, and after that. But assuming 30,000 for the physical part and for the body of the robot is realistic, I guess. And software, again, it's software, so the marginal cost per piece is minimal. I just included $3,000 for it. But this should be also way too much.
Wow. Okay, so many questions. Where do I even begin? So, what is it? So you say this is RAS, robots as a service.
Yeah.
Is there any incentive, or rather, at what point would it be an incentive for companies that manufacture these bots, let's say Figure, Tesla, Unitary, Ubitech, etc., Agility, to start selling these to customers? And I would imagine you're looking at labor, uh, replacing the human labor force step by step, mostly in factories, warehouses, right? Have you considered the household applications?
We have. We believe there is a timeline. So household is not at the beginning. We know that there is 1X. They are targeting the household directly. That's the
Yep.
differentiation. But for most manufacturers, the use case will be manufacturing, production, logistics, services, and then the household. We'll see all kinds of combinations of those. In manufacturing, real world work can be done today at a very, very limited, to a very limited degree. We'll see in a year, maybe in two, much more capability. So if
Yeah.
Optimus is assumed, Optimus version 3 is assumed to be really useful, then those humanoid robots are eating up human labor from the lower end. It's all dirty, dangerous, difficult, and dull, but they're going to fill all the jobs that are vacant, because there is a shortage of, some say 60, some say 80 million people globally. This is the first batch that's going to be filled. Then it's going to eat up from the easier, from the simple tasks to the more qualified. And at some point in time, we will even be able to replace the plumber.
Okay. All right. So that's unique, because you think blue collar jobs will also be affected, but in time. And a lot of the discussion around robotics, and application of humanoids in the labor market, seems to predict that, or feel that, blue collar jobs will perhaps be the ones left for humans. But you're saying they might not in time.
Well, it's all kinds of physical work.
Hmm.
If we look at the hourly cost and we see that you pay humans like $45 and more
Right.
per
Right.
hour,
Yeah.
the advantage is just way too big. You can decide you want to keep your team and you want to use and employ humans for everything, but your competitors won't, and you won't be able to compete. So that's why I
Yeah. It's a
say,
simple cost
yeah.
calculation. It just
So
boils down to that.
the Chinese government wrote in 23 in November a directive to their companies, to the entire economy, and they said, we want and we will be market leaders with humanoid robots in 2027, with the entire value chain, with
Correct.
robots, and I'm quoting, that can think, learn, and be innovative.
Correct.
So this is what we need to really take seriously. This is what they're going to do. And we're lucky that we have some countries in the West that might be able to compete with this.
Right. That's a perfect segue to my next question, which is the interplay of demographics and the capabilities of societies and nations to be able to deploy these robots at scale, not only in the factories, warehouses, but across society, right? And you have so many use cases. Let's look at Europe, where you are right now. You have a demographics challenge. You've got aging populations. There's no the wealth problem is not a problem, right? It's a question of demographics, population, labor force. You've got like migrant issues as well, and a lot of migrants that come in essentially come in to fill the labor, to take up the jobs that are going unfulfilled. So, how do you see this interplay? Because when you start replacing humans with bots, a lot of the good and the bad goes out of the window together, right? It solves certain problems, but it also creates certain problems. How are you looking at it in Europe?
We have a system in our economies that is based on 90% plus people needing a job. So they need an employer and they need to sell their cognitive capacities and or their physical capacities to earn the money that they need to pay their bills and buy their food and pay the housing. So this served us very well for 200 years. Before that, we did not have that many regular jobs. Many more people were kind of self-employed. And this system is going to break. So we will not have that many jobs for humans. This is the first time in history where the transition or disruption is happening so fast that we will not be able, and it will not be necessary to invent new jobs and new functions. And even if we do, and there will be new jobs, there will be new tasks for humans, all those tasks will include AI and robotics very much. So first time in history, we will not have the new jobs and the new employments. So the consequence is massive. We will either end up in a horror scenario, because if people lose their jobs, they don't have the money, they cannot buy their stuff. Companies lose revenue, lose their profit. The governments, the states lose their tax revenue. Everything is going to break down. The alternative is the vision that when you reduce the cost of labor, physical and cognitive labor, you will make anything much cheaper. So we'll have a massive function of deflation, technical deflation and economic deflation. And we're going to be way more productive. So most people think just in efficiencies when they talk about AI, which is we need less people, less money, less resources to do what we do today. But we need to think more in productivity. With the people that we have, with the resources that we have, with the money that we have, we can produce much more value, much more quality of life. And so we in the long run, we're all going to be in an abundance world. But the transition is going to be dangerous. The transition is going to be very, very challenging. We had that 200 years ago already. We had the Luddites. We had the massive transformations in Europe. We had then an era of revolution starting in 1848. So these were not really peaceful times. These were dangerous times. And we're entering an era where we need future intelligent governments, future intelligent businesses that would be preparing early for that. However, humans are short-sighted. We're built for a life in the here and now. So we will not approach this really future intelligently. So the probability is very high that we will experience a couple of years, maybe even decades, that are very turbulent.
Oh no. Come on, Pero. This is supposed to be the age of abundance. It's supposed to be happy and joyful, and all get together and sing Kumbaya and go into the sunset. But thank you. No,
we will get there. We will get
there, not without a bit of pain.
Right.
All right. So you've signposted a really interesting point, which I want to go back to when you mentioned the Chinese agenda and the target of being a world leader in AI and robotics by 2027. Europe is one of the major markets that Chinese companies are targeting or hoping to target for deployment of their AI-enabled bots. Is that a bigger problem for you in the long run? Immigrant labor versus Chinese bot labor. Who controls the labor? Where does their intellectual capital come from? Is that going to be a bigger problem, a geopolitical problem for Europe to tackle?
Well, we're already in a mess since our European AI capabilities, our AI systems, models, companies, they're not really cutting edge. We used to have and still have fantastic capabilities in robotics, industrial robots. Like China bought KUKA, which is still one of the leaders. But an industrial robot and a humanoid robot, and we will see other shapes and forms too, but the humanoid robot is very useful because of its universality.
Correct. Correct.
We also have, there is Norway, Germany, in a couple of labs, but producing them really in scale, I do not see the probability as being very high that we're going to succeed in that. And it is absolutely a challenge, because if you have the robots where we can invest in, then we can all profit from the higher productivity. But if we need to buy the robots from the US or from China, we're losing that to a large part. So we're pretty much already in a mess. And we really need our companies to wake up, our entrepreneurs to wake up. It's not the governments who are gonna fix that.
Yeah. I mean, there's been so much of discussion around sovereign AI models, and companies are setting up their own data centers to train their own AI models on their own data, on their own data sets. But I think there's this gap in the discussion, which is humanoid labor force, AI-enabled humanoid labor force, and the geostrategic importance of having your own bots and controlling the data, what they're trained on, where they're deployed, and it becomes all the more imperative to talk about this, because when you deploy bots in fleets or legions, as Elon likes to call them, when you train one bot, you effectively train the entire legion. What one bot sees, potentially the entire AI model that all those bots are running on sees the same thing. Right? So you've got data security issues, you've got just a really complex web of issues to deal with. So I think it's really, really imperative, and it's not enough has been talked about when it comes to this. Let's quickly just go back to your post and kind of break this down step by step. So this is the first main part where you look at production costs. You say $30,000. A humanoid is roughly 5% the mass of a passenger car. The costly parts are actuators and gearboxes. The rest is electronic sensors and a few kilowatts of batteries and plastics, components that are highly scalable in volume manufacturing. But for each of these parts, there's also your global supply chain. If you're not building your own actuators, if you're not building your own gearboxes, if you're not training your own models on your own data, these are all geopolitical questions that come into effect that then have a bearing on a country or a block of nations' independence and control over their labor force. And I keep coming back to it because these are not just numbers in isolation. When you talk about replacing humans in the labor force with humanoid bots, you have to, as you have in that video, the brilliant video of yours, and I hope we have another chat on that, there are societal implications, right? So how do you help my audience understand this crossover of security and geopolitics with the production aspect of it that you mentioned in your post?
We've done some work recently with companies who are or want to be suppliers for gearboxes, for example, for humanoid robots. They experience the following in China. They say we have everything we need. So there is no, like it happened with the automotive industry. They used to buy the machinery. They used to buy the parts, then they used to buy the machinery, and they are insourcing as much as they can because they want to strengthen their economy. They want to win. So delivering machines to China is still a business, but it's shrinking. Delivering parts is almost gone, as it is with delivering cars. So German manufacturers, for example, lost a large part of their revenue already. So suppliers here need to focus on the Western players and kind of see themselves in an alliance. I mean, we do not produce in Europe or Germany, we do not produce our computers anymore. We used to, but it all went either to China or to the US. So can we still survive? Of course, but at a lower level.
Yeah.
So
and you have to compromise.
Yeah, it seems to be that our wealth is not going to increase that much. Now, if we see the higher productivity through humanoid robots, that might be a factor that's going to help the world, not just Europe. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is something that happened with computers because they became a commodity, and robots and even humanoid robots will be a commodity at some point in time. At least the physical part. Their work is the biggest part of the world economy, so it's not going to be worthless. And what we see here with Figure, people tend to see the world with a status quo bias. That's slow. Everybody can do that. It made a mistake. It is not really what a human does. Yeah, sure. But we are at the beginning of the S-curve. Like in the media and the videos, we are probably at the height of the hype curve. But in capabilities, we're still at the beginning. We reported about a robot called Star that was in 2016, that's 9 years ago, was capable of performing a surgery better than the average surgeon 9 years ago. Now it's better than most of the surgeons. This is how far we got with dexterity already. We've all seen the Boston Dynamics videos. We've seen it for 20 years, but times are really changing, and the progress is really fast. So if we imagine those robots in 5 years, they will be capable of eating up the lower level physical work. And as you said, what they learn, they don't forget. They only forget what they're supposed to forget in order to learn new things. So it's fleet learning and it's self-learning. The concept of end-to-end training is just show the bot what to do. It learns it and does it. And if one can do it, then all of the bots can do it. NVIDIA is training 14, 16, 17 different kinds of robots with their foundation platform Groot, and Isaac in the virtual platform. So the speed of learning is unimaginable, and humans have really no chance to compete in that.
Yeah, in fact, NVIDIA has been working with Foxconn and a lot of other companies also for greenfield and brownfield manufacturing units where everything is developed in digital twins. So right down to the tooling and the bots and the placement and the work and the functions of these bots, everything is now being done in sim to real, which is just mind-boggling because of the implications that also has on the entire manufacturing sector. So very quickly, before I go further into your post with the numbers, what you've said about labor and strategic the importance of control over your labor, and the fact that Europe will probably have to depend on some other company, whether a country, whether it's China or America. That could be a potential NATO-like existence for humanoid labor force.
Yeah, decades ago already, we had to look at scenarios of block building in a new way. So building alliances that are non-military but more economic. The European Union, well, is kind of such a thing. Mercosur is another. If the US still cares about Europe, which is a question, and in long term, I think they will, then there will be at least
Trump is around for just a couple of years more, so I think.
Well, it depends. It depends on his health, and it depends on his conformity with the Constitution.
Right.
But we are more aligned, and we are more together than it seems today. A certain kind of alliance is a scenario that is pretty well imaginable.
Yeah. All right. So let's quickly go back to your post. And so you look at the operating cost, the operating time, the work speed. And before we get to the business model, just help us break down what this means for my audience, the implications, because it's one thing to look at numbers, but it's really important to understand how these numbers come into play and what they mean for human society and the human labor force.
So 6,600 hours. I arrived at that number with 330 days and 20 hours per day. What are they going to do in those 35 days that are missing? I don't know. I just wanted to be conservative. There is no real reason not to say it's 360 days, because why should a robot work less than a CNC center, than a machine in production? 20 hours a day. Could it be more? Yeah, could be more. We just seen Walker replacing its own battery. So if the battery is modular, you have one part of the battery still in the robot, and the robot can replace the other part. So battery swapping is one of the ways. If it's stationary, it can be plugged in or can be charged through induction. So 6,600 hours per year is already 3.5 people. That's the implication. That's why one robot
One is to 3.5. Wow.
Yeah, and this is why one robot produces a financial advantage, all other things being equal, of roughly $200,000 compared to human work in all three scenarios. So in the scenario with $14 per hour, or 12 or 10, we are somewhere at around 200,000. This is accurate enough to prove there will be no choice but to use them. That was the thesis that I was trying to prove. The work speed is another factor. When we see those robots today, they're maybe about at 5-10%, maybe 20%. But this is today. Industrial robots are at a multiple of human speed. And there is no reason to believe that humanoids will not catch up to 100% pretty quickly and then surpass human speed, human working speed. Those 6,600 and the 3.5 people is calculated at 100%. If you put it at 200%, then it's 12,000 hours, or the 13,200 hours, which is 7 humans. And there is no real limiting factor there.
Wow. I don't know whether to be scared or excited.
I suggest you be both.
Yeah.
I mean, the major the major problem, as I said, is our system where people need jobs. Tell me, what is the group of people? There's one group of people who are supposed not to be scared, but just to be happy about this. There's just one group. Those people who own companies or shares of companies who
Yes.
are well prepared for the AI and robotic world and economy.
Yeah.
So
Correct.
those people profit massively. What we need to achieve is to make as many people as possible become owners of productive assets, of productive companies that are well prepared for this new world of AI and robotics, which
Yeah.
is a massive endeavor. In Europe, we have maybe our biggest problem is our risk aversion.
Yes.
Everything needs to be safe
Yeah.
in medication, in finance, and they really arrived at the conviction that saving money in an account is safer because it's not as volatile as on the stock market, and they are
Yes.
sacrificing the opportunity, and they've done it for decades, especially in
Yeah.
Germany. They're sacrificing 7% or 8% annual profit on the stock market, and take, instead of that, take 1% net, maybe, if
Yeah.
it's not eaten up by inflation.
But
So
in all fairness, in defense of that culture, that investing culture, it's not just Europe where it exists. It's even China, Southeast Asia. It's a risk averse, it's passed down through the generations, and it's a
yeah,
risk averse methodology of savings. But it's just because it is doesn't mean it makes sense or that it's applicable to this
right.
new era that we're entering. Yeah, exactly. So another point that you've made in another video that you've been referencing that really struck me, and I just want to touch upon it here because I don't want to go too deep into it. But governments are lousy at allocating resources. The question of leaving it up to governments and policymakers to redistribute resources in an age where human labor is replaced by humanoid bot labor and AI. If you can't trust the governments to do a good job, and you mentioned that maybe it's the minority that either own these companies or shareholders of these robotic companies, how do you build a just society? How do you, or let's not even get to just, how do you bring about some sort of a decent level of reallocation of resources?
Big question. So as you said, I did a pretty long video on that. There's the side of how we're going to provide people with income and how are we going to finance this. The first thing, how we're going to provide people with income, again, ideally, subsidizing ownership of companies. But this takes it takes a pretty long time because that's built over a generation and more. So we should also help people if they lose their job to their trucking job to an autonomous truck. We should help them invest in those trucks so they can earn the income immediately. If they lose their service jobs to a humanoid robot, we should help them invest in those humanoid robots directly. That's one way to accelerate the process. And what they just started in the US in a very tiny with a very tiny step, we should give every newborn 100,000 euros or dollars or more, which sounds much, but looking at the entire system, it's not that much. And they are bound to keep it in an investment fund for 60 years. They can borrow against it, but this would make it possible, at least over a generation or two, to build the wealth and the ownership of productive assets. But all this is not enough.
Right.
All this is not enough. We will need to pay transfers. Usually people
Correct.
think about the unconditional basic income,
Yeah.
and I don't see a reason why it should be unconditional. So at least it should be a negative income tax.
Correct.
And European, not just European, but major European for the most part, they tend to build massive administrations to really find out how much you need and how much we need to pay you. It's very easy. If we set a minimum income, then the negative tax is just compare what you declared as income, and if your income is not enough, the IRS in the US or any kind of tax authority will pay you out. And everything is already in place. We have the software, we have the data. We do not need big administrations. The entire Social Security administration of virtually any country is actually superfluous. If it's just about the effect that people need to have their income, then we could use a negative income tax and abolish all of that and save the money to pay to people. So this is the part where we need transfers. And if it's a negative income tax, then only those who really need it will get it. And the closer we get to this abundance world, the less a negative tax is going to be paid out. Yeah. And this is a
Alternatively,
massive transformation.
yeah. We're running a bit low on time and just have a few minutes left with you, so I want to push through very quickly. What do you think of the Trump administration's decision to pick up 10% in Intel? Because that could really be one of the solutions in a bouquet of solutions where the government uses taxpayer money, because the government is all about taxing and deployment of those tax resources, right? So instead of building a social net, the government then invests in these companies on behalf of the citizens, and then whatever is accrued out of dividends or whatever earnings is then distributed. That could perhaps be another alternative to add to these.
Now we are at a religious question. In the video about financing that, I introduced 4 principles, and the 4th one is as much private initiative as possible, and keep the role of the state and the government as small as possible. Governments have never been, are not, and will never be good entrepreneurs. We see that with Volkswagen, where the government has a stake in the company. The company is very slow. The company is not really profitable, or not really that profitable as competitors as it could be. So if you ask me, I would do it in as much as a private way as possible, because then we really have efficiency, then we really have productivity, and we have skin in the game. That's why governments are not good entrepreneurs, because they don't have any skin in the game. It's not their money.
Indeed, indeed. All right, and I began this chat by referencing your post where you say, urgent advice: if you make or move anything physical, start rethinking your business around humanoids as a supplier, service provider, or user. It is quiet now, but the ramp up will be fast. What's the one thing you would want, the one thought that you would want to leave my audience with?
So if you have a business or work in a business that moves anything physical, build this business on a mental greenfield basis. Build it anew. Imagine how someone who's really obsessed with humanoid robots, obsessed with AI, how they would build the company that you are working in or running to provide the same value, the same effects, the same benefits to customers. Now you have 2 extremes. You have your status quo, and you have the possibly conceivable new company in 5 or 10 years from now. Compare them and start with those differences that are fixable the fastest and maybe the easiest. That's how you should think and how you should proceed.
Well, a lot of food for thought there. Thank you so much, Pero. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And I hope this is the first of many occasions where I get to chat with you on Over the Horizon. And for those of you watching, I'm going to leave the links to Pero's post on X as well as his YouTube video. Please do read that post and watch that video. It's going to give you a lot of food for thought. Thank you so much, Pero. Till next time.
Thank you, Rajan.